Pam Stenzel speaks to over 500,000 young people around the world every year about issues of sexuality and the importance of abstinence. In 2001, she participated in President Bush's faith-based and community initiatives held at the White House. She's been a speaker at the United Nations for the Summit on Children conference. The founder of Enlightened Communications has some eye-openers for all of us, I am quite sure. Pam, you have been away too long.
Oh, I know, it's been forever, but it's so great to be back with you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
In the Rogues Gallery, by the way, for anybody who's toured recently.
Oh, I'll have to
they
go
would
look.
see your face up there, so we'll have to get a fresh picture.
Yeah.
Fresh picture. I think that is what you will bring today. I just want you to know that our audience has, in recent weeks and months, had some eye-openers about the sexualization of our teens and really the pervasive embracing of a worldview that does not line up with God's standards. And this has been your passion for almost 20 years.
A long time.
Speak into this.
Yeah, you know, I started working in pregnancy centers from college, but I think my passion for getting involved was because my own personal story. Back in the 60s, a young 15-year-old girl was raped and had a lot of difficult choices to make, and maybe more so because of the rape, you know, and she chose to give that child life and then to place that child with an adoptive family, and that child was me. I mean, my own biological father is a rapist. I don't even know my ethnicity, but I believe that I'm still a human being and I still have value, and that my life isn't worth less than someone else's just because of the way I was conceived. And I don't believe I deserve the death penalty simply because of the crime of my biological father.
Wow, that's a lot of drama right out of the gate.
Well, you know, I've not gotten to meet my birth mother, but someday I hope to, and I've been praying for since I was 4, because when I meet her, I'm just going to wrap my arms around her and tell her I love her, because she loved me enough to give me my life and then to give me my amazing family. I have the greatest adoptive family. My parents, I'm the oldest of 8 children, 7 of us adopted, every color of the rainbow in my family. And I was raised in a godly home with a mom and dad who loved Jesus and taught me not only my own value as a person, but how much God loved me and what a plan he had for me, which is so important, because I think some people say, well, obviously God planned that person, but God didn't plan me. I was a mistake. But you know what? The Bible says that he knew me before the foundations of the world and formed me in my mother's womb, and he had a plan for me. And I just wanted to reach out to young women who maybe were experiencing a crisis pregnancy, because I don't know who was there for my own birth mother, and I hoped I could be there for them. And so for 9 years, I counseled pregnant girls and walked them through the decision-making process, because they're not, you know, the best choice is before you have sex. That's when the good choice happens. After that, it becomes very, very difficult. And after years of doing that, I realized that these girls were afraid of pregnancy, and pregnancy was not the worst of the consequences. A girl would come in, and for a pregnancy test, it would be negative. A lot of them were negative. And she's like ready to bolt out my door. And I'm like, wait a minute, have you been tested for syphilis, gonorrhea, herpes, chlamydia, trichomonas, vulvodynia, arthritis, hepatitis B, hepatitis C? Have you been tested for this? And she's like, well, I live in Hamilton, not Toronto. You know, I shouldn't need to be tested for that. And the reality is that these kids don't realize that it's not just pregnancy survivable. I mean, pregnancy your body was meant to do that. God created us as women to conceive and to bear a child.
There's much more risk
here. The disease is far, far greater. And you know, here's the deal. I tell adults this because sometimes they think, what's the big difference? I was in high school and made some choices I shouldn't have made. If you would have graduated high school in 1967, 1 in 32 of your classmates would have been infected with an STD. That was the onset of the sexual revolution. If you would have graduated with me in 1982, it's 1 in 18. Today, it's 1 in 4. In fact, the Centers for Disease Control now says there is no way anyone under 24 could have sex with someone who is not a virgin and not get a disease. It is statistically impossible. So now this medical community is not asking if they're infected, they're asking what they have. And the last time I was in Washington, D.C., and we had talked about having worked with President Bush's team, well, we now have a new president, and he has decided to take away all of the money for abstinence education in our country. So it was all cut off, all the funding for abstinence education. So I went to the conference where they were going to tell us, now what are we going to be teaching our kids? And at that Department of Health and Human Services said, now the curriculum says everybody gets an STD. Everybody gets one. It's no big deal. It's like the chicken pox or the flu.
You'll get over it?
There should be no shame. And so here's where we've come. In the 60s, we threw off God's standard. We said, we don't need God. We don't need him to tell us how to handle our sex lives. We can do whatever we want. And 40, pushing 50 years down the road now, we have massive infidelity, STDs, infertility. Infertility among women has risen over 500% in 10 years. A great deal because of sexually transmitted disease infection. And we're not telling our girls that the choice they make on prom night might mean they'll never be able to be mothers.
Well, and on the impact it'll have on their future marriage. And we know so much now. Endless.
Endless.
I'm just impressed that a child of rape has not allowed that dark start to, you're a mother of 3 great kids.
Yeah.
You did not go off the rails in your teens. Your kids are all doing well, and you've had to go through the hormonal stage with at least, well, all of them.
All of them.
Because your youngest is what, 17?
17. The baby is 17. My oldest is married a wonderful Christian man and teaches first grade and loves it. My only daughter, and then my other son is still single and working on people's computers. But
I was just talking to a pastor who said he sees the big problem, part of the big problem with suicide among teens is memory and imagination. And the point he made was they're looking at their past experience and it's infecting their view of the future. That could have been your story, but you plugged into the God who loves you,
right?
The truths of God and that he has planned for you, and you escape that derailment.
Well, and I think part of it is this. Just because I began that way, just because that was my beginning, does not need to be my future. And we believe in a God of redemption, a God who is capable of taking your worst pain, whether it was something you chose or something that was done to you, and given to him, he can make something very beautiful come from that.
Now, you've just come from an assembly, and you've got a whole lot of them lined up around here, which is exciting.
Yeah.
You say if the kids have the facts, they can make the right moral choice in spite of the media, in spite of the peer pressure, in spite of the social acceptance of all of this immorality.
Right, I think there's a few key things. One is this. It used to be back in my day, and I grew up in the church, so I grew up going to Sunday school and church and Wednesday night prayer meeting. Every time the church was open, my family was there, so I spent a lot of time there. But in my day, back in the dark ages, here's what was said at church. God said, don't do it, thank you for coming to class. I mean, that was it. And in theory, it should be enough, right? I should be able to say to you, God said, don't do it. You don't need why. It's kind of like the parent that says, because I told you so, right?
Exactly.
You don't need to understand the why. The thing is, we have the why, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and I think it's desperately important that this generation understand why, so that they see God's law, not as mean and trying to wreck their weekend, but they see it as love, and God saying, you know what, I love you so much, and I want to protect you. I want to protect your fertility. I want to protect your future marriage. I want to protect your mind.
But they don't have the experience with God to trust that pleasing God matters. So when you hear, as you have and did for years, well, nobody told me, you're out to tell them. Let me give you the facts on your choices.
Well, because the media is telling them they can do all of this, they can have multiple partners as long as they have a condom, that's fine. And the problem is that's not true. It's not even true medically. The condoms don't protect from the 2 major STDs we're dealing with, which are viral, herpes and human papillomavirus. Don't protect at all because they're contracted by skin contact. And human papillomavirus is a serious virus for girls and for women with cervical cancer and possibly complete infertility, if not death. And herpes might be annoying, but who wants that, And so if they understood medically what was going on, I think they would say, wait a minute, I don't want to risk that. It's not worth it. And then I think the next kind of step that I'm trying to get kids to understand is that sexual discipline is something that is learned before marriage, not after. See, I think my generation had this idea that we could kind of sleep around, sow your wild oats, do whatever, and then someday we'll get married, we'll flip a switch, and now we'll be able to control what we never controlled back there. And that's not working very well for my generation. And even in the church, and this is what's tearing us apart, the infidelity, the inability to remain faithful to their spouse, and then divorce, and all of these things are affecting my generation hugely. And one of my favorite pastors, oh, this was brilliant. I was sitting down with him. He said, Pam, every couple that comes to my church to get married has to come sit down with me before they get married.
Premarital counseling.
Right? And he's tough. I love him because a lot of pastors are not tough enough on these kids. He said, the first thing he asks them is, are you having sex or are you living together? Oh. And if they say yes to either of those, he looks at them with wisdom and says, you have both told each other by your behavior. By your behavior, you've both told each other that you are perfectly comfortable having sex with someone you're not married to. And weddings don't fix that. You've already made the decision. So the truth in our faith, in our churches, we need to understand, if we don't get this right before they walk the aisle, we're going to end up with families and couples and marriages in our churches that are not only dealing with the mess of infertility and pain, but they're dealing with infidelity and...
Oh, well, and this is obviously not just a Western problem, because your teaching, your DVD, which was called Sex Has a Price Tag.
Right.
You were known
for that. Sex has a price
tag. It is now The High Cost of Free Love. And let me tell you where this is being viewed. The U.S., Canada, Mexico, Central and South America, Australia, Ireland, Europe, Ukraine, Romania, Poland, and throughout Africa. Any response on how it's being received?
Oh, I tell you, I let students email me because they can go to my fan page on Facebook or they can email me from my website at pamstenzel.com. And just in February, I get an email from a young 15-year-old girl from Dubai. And she says to me, we were watching your DVD in our class at she goes to a private boarding school in Dubai. She's Italian. And she said, I just never heard that information before, and it so moved me and my own story, the story about how I began. Well, then she proceeds to tell me that she was walking home from school and was raped by a shopkeeper and was too afraid to tell anyone. She's afraid she might be pregnant. And I'm going, how do I help this girl in Dubai? She goes, if you don't have 3 witnesses, they could stone you. I mean, it's a completely different culture. So I'm praying and I'm saying, God, please give me wisdom. We found a pastor that was not 2 blocks from her school in Dubai. We got his phone number to her. We said, please go talk to him. We need to get you some help. Well, come to find out, they helped call her mother in Italy. Her parents came and got her. She's going to carry her baby to term and place that little baby for adoption with a family in Italy, all because she watched that DVD in her school. It's just absolutely astounding. I was so thrilled to hear back from her and how thankful she was for the help that we were able to find her all the way across the world. So I just know that this is making a difference and helping students to understand. And this is a tough topic for pastors and for their youth pastors to talk about. And that's why it's nice. Have somebody come in and do it for you who doesn't know your kids, who can be tough, who can give them the information. And that helps it so that the youth pastor doesn't have to be the one to say all of the hard things that I get to say.
Straight up is good. This is a serious issue. And you may be nodding within, as I have for part of this, well, nobody told me. You may be the adult, the parent. And guess what? Pam is dangerous for the kingdom and for kids in a great way. Take a look in the mirror. This one, be transformed by the word, not the world. I'm sure this one is pretty big with the girls.
Yeah, that's my girl talk. Girls and their moms. Yeah.
And we've got 2 books. Here's Nobody Told Me, a signature theme with Pam, and Who's in Your Social Network. Boy, do we ever want to blame this one. Big contributor. Yeah. Check out our e-store for Pam's materials and pamstenzel.com. Wow. Thank you for making us a stop between assemblies, Pam.
Oh, it's a privilege. I'm so grateful to be able to share what God's been doing.
I'm sure you're not home in Minnesota too much of the time.
Well, it was snowing, so I'm good to not be home at Minnesota when it snows this early in the fall.
Good to have you here.